This is Eric Hux of Hux Racing. In this video, we will detail how to modify an SW20 MR2 chassis harness for standalone use. We will also be locating the ECU behind the driver's seat, as well as removing all the unnecessary relays and wiring from the harness and breaking out the wiring that we will be using in a simple 12-pin connector. Now, before I get into starting with an untouched harness, I really wanted to show you what the end product looks like so you have a better understanding of where we're going with the process. Now, this harness has already been completely reworked. It's already done. I'm going to show you the kick panel in first, up by the left-hand side, which would be the driver's feet in a left-hand drive car. So these are all the connectors that would need to be unplugged or, let me actually peel this back, would be unbolted from the left-hand side kick panel. And this harness actually runs all the way back to the power antenna on power antenna cars, all the way to the right-hand side tail light. Now, let me detail each of these connectors for you so you know the names. We're going to label all these same connectors on the next harness that we do, so you have an understanding when I'm talking about pin locations and connectors, which one I'm talking about, and give you a better understanding of which end of the harness that we're working on. So make this simple, this is the alternator cable. I showed you the two holes. This is actually underneath a black cover on the left hand side, and you got to pop that black cover open and you'll see two M6 nuts under there. We'll go to connector IE1. So that's IE1. That's the pins. I'm marking there pin 1 for you. And these connectors are actually numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, etc. All the connectors are numbered in that same scheme. That's IE1. IE2 is a 40 amp feed to the back half of the car for the ECU, a factory fuel pump under 255 liters per hour, coils, etc. We'll use that to power our relay panel or relay box. Here's IE3. You can see on this one that I've already removed all the necessary wiring. And this connector, unless you are saving ABS, you will remove every wire but this one. If there's ABS, there'll be 3 other additional wires. I believe it's 3, yeah, because you're only dealing with the left channel, the left rear channel of ABS in this connector. That's IE3, and here is IE4 and pin 1. As we work our way back in the car, the first thing we're going to come to is a ground wire, which you would have needed to unbolt from behind the door jamb to get the harness out. You must put this back in place when you put your harness back in. This must be bolted down to the chassis because that will be part of the harness ground. You'll have the section that runs up to the third brake light and the defrost. You'll see a lot of people, instead of doing the work to pull the headliner down, they'll actually just peel the section back and cut these wires and then just splice it back into the car. Not everybody wants to go to the effort to pull the interior part to get this section out. This harness, we've already set the length of the the IE2 connector. This is a 40 amp feed to the back half of the car, and this car will actually be using a busman box, so we've already terminated it with a ring terminal to attach to a fuse block, which will show how to I actually won't be detailing how to build this type of harness, but I'll be using the Hybrid Racing Universal. And then with those, we'll be supplying a connector to the guys who buy our wiring, the DIY wiring kits. Supply you with a connector to make it plug and play into that relay bank. And then we'll also be using a junction block like this. Then we can just run like say a 6-gauge single cable out to the alternator on whichever engine you're swapping in the car. This harness swap, I'm not sure if I said this, but it could be, doesn't need to be K-Series, 3S. Any car that you're putting a standalone in, you're putting the ECU behind the seat. This is the easiest way to simplify the chassis harness, to remove all the junk so you're not having to troubleshoot through all the unnecessary wiring. You don't need the fuse block in the back with its redundant relays and unnecessary wiring. This is just the simplest way to clean this whole deal up. Set this off to the side. This here is a 12-pin molex. This connector will also be supplying in the kit, the male-female kit with all the pins. I'll show you how to terminate that. I'll show you how to determine which is pin location 1 and how these connectors are numbered and which wires to keep. Keep following back. This is the BM1 connector. This connector has the fuel pump wire on it. This will be found behind the left-hand seat, behind the driver's seat in a US car. up on the firewall. There'll be a mating female connector up there to tie this into, and then that will run the fuel pump signal to the fuel pump. And if we keep following the harness around, we get a, I believe that's a noise suppressor. Taillights. And this harness was stripped further down. This is actually, we're getting to the, this is actually trunk light, tail lights, and reverse lights and such, getting through the harness. This would be the tail light section. You'll see that this harness was stripped much further along, and it's loomed much further into it. Typically, I would stop here at this point and strip all the way forward on the harness, removing all the factory loom, all the necessary bits of wrap. And then at that point, I would start to rework it. So that's all. I just wanted to show you what the finished product looks like before we go in and start from ground zero and show you what the process is to clean the harness, depin it, and get all the necessary stuff out of it, and then which wires to keep and how to properly terminate it. So please stay tuned. Okay, everybody, ready for a real-time display of what it takes to prepare an MR2 chassis harness. You can see the fuse box. I've already got the lid. The engine harness section's already separated off of it. Pull some of the dust out of it. The lid's already off. The two nuts are already off of here. This is the chassis harness section before any work is done to it. Now, just so we can tell what we're doing, we're going to go and label the connectors just like we did before. So obviously this is the alternator. This is IE2. This is IE1. This one is IE3. And this one is IE4. And just so I don't mess up, pin 1. So pin 1, pin 1, pin 1. And then the other connector that we will be concerned with, we follow from the main trunk back. We once again have the ground that had to be unbolted from the door jamb. We have our the section for the defrost, and this one actually has a door switch. Yeah, so a door switch and possibly third brake light speakers. Now, further on up, this is the BM1. BM1. This is the one that's going to have the fuel pump wire that plugs in behind the seat that I described in the when I showed you the finished harness. So we have those connectors marked. Those are definitely the ones we marked are definitely all keepers. Throw that section off to the side. Let's see. So we'll start with this. This would have been the engine bay temp sensor for the fan. We know that's a goner. Snip that right off. That off to the side. Unsure if this guy's keeping ABS, so I'm gonna go ahead and maintain the ABS wires in this harness. You'll see what I do to save them. So I'm just gonna go ahead and mark this ABS. So we keep his sensor wire on this side. Now this is the fun part. This is what scares everybody. Just start cutting. We're not keeping that. Not keeping this. This is a factory fuel pump relay stuff. Garbage. All these connectors in the back that went to the ECU. Gone. Pull the back off of this guy. Pry this out of here. I mean, in reality, you can just cut this off. You don't need to pull it out that way, but that's just the way I usually do it. snip that, snip that, snip this. Now, if you get lost, there's also a on K-Swap, www.kswapmr2.com. There's a series, there's a picture tutorial that shows the same work I'm doing here. Garbage. All right. Go ahead and strip that off. Try not to shake the table too much. Let's see, where is my bigger scissors? Get that off of there. Try not to cut into any of the wires. Look at that. So this is the point where I typically strip forward from. So from this point here. So snip that. So usually I'll just put a zip tie right here. As I said in the first part, from this little black, like I said, I believe it's a like a resistor, like a noise suppressor. So from that point forward, we will strip the harness. Like I said, I'm trying not to shake the table too much because I know the camera is set upon it. So the first part of this will just be me stripping all this stuff back. I believe this one was a turbo harness. The 5SFE body harness would typically have like a big formed plastic section in here that you have to cut out. There's a lot of like these thick plastic wraps through here. You can find the seam of it. Cut the layer on the outside and you just peel it back. Just like that. Feels like it's starting to get warm in here because I have all the shop doors closed to keep the bugs down while I do this tonight. So all that peeled back, garbage. There will be an insane amount of stuff that we remove from this harness. Once again, all the way to this connector here, or excuse me, this boot. Boot off. Garbage. Okay, now we'll go back and we'll get all this insulation stuff off. you'll find as you start to unloom all this back, you'll find that there will be a bunch of loose wires that will just end up pulling away and falling out from all of this. Okay. This is where people start to get scared of what they're doing, but I will show you how to make sense of all this once we get all this mess off of here. See, piece of loose wire, gone. Forward to this section here. Usually I would just yank the shit out of this, but I'm afraid I'm going to rock the table too much. Okay. Here's where I like to put a zip tie, just so the links don't get all pulled around. If you don't put a couple of zip ties to the length of it, you'll end up having the whole harness like pulled at different lengths and have all your connectors offset at the other end. Get a drink here. Okay. Snip that. Recognize this. This is the BM1. This is our defog third brake light. And that ground wire we pointed out earlier. Sorry if I sound a little choked up, but I just got over a case of strep and I think I caught a cold right after that. So, sorry if I sound a little nasally. Keep going. This is the funnest part of the whole process. Look at that. Hopefully I'm not going off camera with any of this. Get into a little rhythm here, stripping these harnesses down and forget where I'm at. Okay, before we go any further here, I'd like to maintain the relationship of all these, the ends of these connectors, the links. So I like to put a zip tie down here at the end before I finally clean the rest of this off. Almost there on the stripping section. Now we want to get these off too, because we will be pulling a lot of this. That one. right. Now we have the harness fully stripped of all the unnecessary insulation right now, or all the loom that's just going to be in our way. Pull this section down. Okay, this part here is usually the mess that scares people to death. So what we want to do is we really just want to pull all the loose wires separate. So I like to take something heavy, stick it in the middle, and then just start to find all the loose wires. It becomes far less intimidating once you separate. See, here's a loose wire, pitch it, another loose wire, pitch, more loose, gone. Pull that one up there. Get the camera, everything's still good. Okay. So now at this point, I have all the loose wires pulled off to the side. Here's everything. Here's the trunk that's all running to the tail lights and the power antenna. You'll find you're going to have several pigtails that are loose in here. You just want to snip those off, toss them away, because you're not going to be tying anything into these. It was just stuff that went to the stock ECU position. Here's another one, gray and white, gone. There's a wire I missed. Pull it clear. There we go. Now, there's one wire right here. Red wire with a black stripe. That's going to be your reverse lights. We're going to splice back into that later. But at this point, I'll go ahead and take some electrical tape. Find my scissors. Cut off a piece. And then just tape off this point here. In reality at this point, everything from this point back is done. I will end up cutting this zip tie off back here that I put by this black resistor. Snip that off. Another piece of electrical tape. Wrap around that. Oh, there's a pigtail. Actually, where's this loose wire going to? Pigtail. Ended up finding that when I was taping up the end. So like I said, there's several of these factory splices with the black tape around it with extra little pigtails that would have went to the ECU or the connectors in the middle of the chassis. None of those are being used anymore, so you just end up cutting those little tails off. All right, so now that we're down to this point, we're first going to peel off this ABS connector because we know we're going to leave that in the chassis, and that's going to stay. So try to clean up some of the stuff that's all wrapped around it. Set that out here in the open. That's going to be all the way here in the back. I'm going to go ahead and put a piece of tape around that too, just to keep that in place. If you're deleting ABS, you'll end up just pulling that all the way out to the connector and terminating it. Look how dirty harnesses are. Ooh. All right, now start with the biggest wires. They have the most weight and all this, and try to pull the harness off the bench. So we're going to pull the 40 amp IE2 out and the alternator connector. Sometimes there's some wires that are spliced all throughout this. cut some of this off so I can pull these two wires out separate. There's one there. There's one there. Now, here, I'm going to pull all of this far forward. Here's our BM1. We can go ahead and take the fuel pump wire, pull it up with it. It's just going like a rat's nest here until we get to a point we start pulling all these unused wires out. Okay, we're back here to the middle of the harness. You know, ground wire, your landmarks. This ground wire, defog, third brake light. So we're going to pull two alternator wires together, and then the 40 amp feed here. I like to pull both of these to this point, probably 2 inches after the defog and the third brake light. And then we're just going to use a zip tie and lock that position in. There we go. So that position is locked in. Now all those loose wires we had, I'll try to get this in the middle of the screen. All those loose wires, we want to pull them forward to this point here. We had them all the way back, you know, closer towards the taillights. We want to bring all those loose wires forward to this point. It's going to make it easier for us to start pulling them out of the harness. So it just looks like a rat's nest until you start to get all this stuff out of here. See how they just wrap around everything? Where are you going, wire? Ah, see. And a blue wire with a white stripe is never going to anything. This one's being a mess. What you'll find is in some harnesses, all these loose wires are kind of like woven amongst the others, and in some they're not. They're just laid all out separate, and you can just take the whole pile and lay them out cleanly. This one's not being a good example, so, which is probably the best example, so you can see how much of a nightmare all this is sometimes. Pull my BM1 out of here. So BM1 still has a couple of wires that go to the back. I think part of it was like security and possibly like the latch, for the security for the latch. But those two wires run to the back, and then you got the fuel pump wire. But we're just going to lay that off to the side right now. And I'll show you how to pull that all back in. Okay. Woo! Got that mess. So here, you can see all the loose wires. They're still kind of woven amongst everything, making for a mess. We don't want to cut any of these yet because at least 11 to 12 of them we're keeping, and we don't want to lose the length on them. So there's my weight. So that's us separating the mess. You've got the alternator and the 40 amp feed that I got here on the zip tie. You have all the wires running to the back. You have the BM1 right here, which I'll show you how to set the length on that. So the BM1 still back here connected to the taillight section. Set something on it so it don't go anywhere. And then here's all the loose wires that no longer have a termination that we need to contend with. So I'm going to pull all these this way so they're not going to pull the camera down when I start to yank all these out of here. And the straighter you can make all of this mess, the easier it's going to be for you to unpin all of these. I hate to leave unused wires in a harness because it just makes future troubleshooting a nightmare. And if you're trying to get the weight down in your car, who wants to carry around all this unused shit anyways? Okay. There. Separated. Now, going up to the front here, going to start with the easiest connector to clean out. It's always this one here, IE3. Simply because we're gonna, if we didn't have ABS, this would be the only wire left over. We would depend every one of these and only keep this one on IE3. But since this car is still keeping the ABS, you can see this loom section here. We're keeping this white, this black, and I believe there was going to be a ground. This loom, there it is. So, since we're keeping the ABS, we'll be keeping this white with a black stripe, this white, and this black wire. So those ones are keepers. So, take our pick. We're going to pop that lock open like that. Then we're going to start removing all these unused wires. So it's as simple as, there's a little plastic clip there. It's as simple as prying that clip back and then pulling the wire out. And I've probably done over 100 harnesses, so I'm pretty sure about which wires to remove. And you'll find there's several wires that have the same color. Like there's several solid black wires. And as you start to pull all these ones that we know we're not going to keep out, then all those redundant wires just start to disappear, and we're only left with the ones we know we need. There we go. Now, I depend all of those, only left the ABS and this black wire with a yellow stripe. Set my lock back down. What I do to, I'll do this several times here, but you'll see I keep shuffling. Like I had this zip tie. All my wires are above it. I'm going to put another zip tie above here. Cut this zip tie. And now all my wires are below. So all those wires that came loose are now down here below. Let's see. Yes. I believe I got all of them. Sweating good in here. Okay. So now, let me pull all these up out of here. Got myself a green and white wire captured. Don't want to be yanking on it. So all these wires that we depend, we can now just start pulling them through. Watch as you're pulling these through, sometimes they will snag on other wires or wrap around them for no reason and just get your shit all caught. So that wire's pulled. This yellow one. That wire's pulled. I'm gonna say that wire's pulled every damn time. And again. Trying to keep all this in the center of the screen for you. All right. See how many of those wires just disappeared? We now have pulled that much out of it. Toss those off to the side. Now that we have pulled a a significant portion of the unused wires. I'll now go through here and pull the ones, even the copies of the ones that I'll be keeping, because then in the process I'll show you how to pull the wires for the other connectors. So I'm going to grab every yellow wire here. Every wire, so there's going to be yellow, green, yellow, blue, solid yellow, yellow, black. The yellow with the blue, I can already tell you, the yellow with the blue we will not keep. So I can find it, pull it, find it moving here, pull the yellow with the blue out. What's it go to? Don't know, don't care. So all the yellow wires, going to pull those to right here. That's going to be part of that 12-pin molex connector that I showed you earlier. So there's that. There's going to be a solid red wire, which is the starter signal wire. It's always going to have a bunch of damn splices on it, so we know that is the correct solid red wire. Some harnesses will have multiple solid reds in it. This one appears to not be one. This one has a red wire with a yellow stripe. I can tell you now that that is not a keeper. And I like to use the red wire with a yellow stripe to extend my reverse lead. I'll show you that shortly. So I know not going any particular order here, but on the kswapmr2.com, I do have a written list of the wires that we know we keep. This pink wire and this brown wire, I already know, not keeping. Pulling the pink wire out. Brown. It's easy to, I got the two zip ties here. I can pull it. I can see the wire move on this other end, and then I just pull it free. So, I know that being this blue wire with a white stripe, not a keeper. See if we can find it. There it is. Pulled. Green wire, white stripe. That's the check engine light. Keeping that. White wire with a black stripe. That's our water temp sensor ground. Keeping that. Try to pull it a little cleanly through here so not such a mess of wires here in the middle. Okay, solid white wire, not a keeper. Pull it free. Not sure if this guy intends to keep his air conditioning, but I'll go ahead and terminate it on the 12 pin so you guys can see it. So black wire, white stripe, that's going to be your AC compressor or clutch on. So keeping that wire. This is a 92 car with a mechanical speedo, so I won't be keeping any purple wires. The 93 plus cars, there will be a purple wire that will be next to the tach signal wire on the IE1 connector. But this car being a 91, 92, no speed signal purple wires being kept. Black wire, orange stripe, that's the key on, ignition on signal to the back half of the car. And then we have two solid black wires here. One of these is the tach signal, one is not. Now, I'm going to show you how to tell. So at this point, you're only going to have possibly two solid black wires left. One of them's a tach, one of them's not. If I grab this section of the harness, I go find connector IE1. Here's pin 1, so that's going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. This pin 8, which is a solid black wire, that is going to be not the tach signal. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to yank on this. I'm going to put my weight here to keep my stuff from sliding off the table. And you can see there, the wire is pulling clear. Okay. So at this point, I might have gone a little fast, but by process of an elimination, this is all the wires that we are keeping out of that main harness section. Now I am going to be splicing on a reverse light wire, showing you how to pull back the fuel pump wire and how to splice the ground for the start signal in the water temp sensor. So here's the BM1 is still running back to the rear. We're just going to leave this off to the side. Okay, now that I know that I'm down to those wires, what I like to do now is let's go ahead and lock some of these portions of the harness in position. So take a piece of electrical tape, and what I've done with my little scissors. I'm not sure if you can see that on the vid, but then I'll just cut lengths of tape. So not going to be pulling any more wires from this point. Not going to be making any more changes at this point. Cut this off. Yeah, cut that off. I like to use electrical tape like this to band the harness, because when we go to put the loom on it, it looms a lot better without zip ties under it. Now I'm going to pull all this back all the way to here. Now you can see all these loose wires that I said I knew we weren't using, that I pulled forward. We want to try to get these all down as close to this end as possible. I assure you this is easier to do when you're not trying to keep it all in front of a camera. So, pull this wire clear. This wire get all round up. Okay. So you can see I got all those pulled. Where's this wire going? Okay. So set this length. Got all this loose shit pulled up to here. Go ahead and put some tape around here. Cut this zip tie. You know, that connector's already done. That's IE3. So all this depinning might seem like a lot of work, and some guys might think it's unnecessary, but it sure makes for a cleaner install, a lighter car, and easier future troubleshooting. If some guys got some other unforeseen issues, like a lot of these guys are buying cars not running, and when they go to do their wiring, they find all sorts of other wiring issues with the car that would have been unforeseen. How this shit just knots itself up on its own. Okay. For shit. It's a knot ass mess. Okay. So now, IE4, there's all the wires we pulled in the back. I now have them all pulled loose all the way up here to the connector. You could have fished each one by one and then pulled it and cut the end off and pulled it free. This is the way I've always done it. Like I said, when I'm not trying to do all this in front of one spot in front of the camera, it goes a lot easier. I'm trying to keep it laid out neat to make sense to you guys. So No, this pink wire is a goner. Pray I got the right pink wire. Yellow wire with a blue stripe. Ooh, I think I just, watch out, sometimes in doing this you'll end up pushing the lock back down. Pry it back open. Ooh, see that? About pulled the wrong damn wire. I got this shit all twisted in here. So, red wire with a yellow stripe. Looks like I almost pulled the starter wire by accident. You guys would have got to watch it. So this is the red wire with a yellow stripe. I like to reuse this to extend the reverse lights wire up to the 12-pin molex connector. Now the only wire I got left to pull is this brown wire. This processor seems to go quieter when I'm not narrating it. Okay, brown wire. Pulled. Kick all that shit behind me. Get this out of here. There we go. So, IE4, all the unnecessary shit removed. IE3 is already done. I got this wire here on IE1. It's just wrapped around damn everything. So all we got left is these wires on IE1. Once again, pry the connector lock back. I think this was pin 8. Gone. Solid white wire. Gone. Purple wire, white stripe. Gone. Okay. So what do we have? We have no other loose wires. Set the lock back down. Pin lock set. There we go. So that is now all that's remaining of all the wires that run to the left side kick panel. I'm going to go ahead and put some electrical tape on this. And that will keep the links of all of this. So all the wires at the kick panel all stayed in relation to each other instead of getting all wonky. And many times I'll come back in and this connector is going to be like that. So I'll just put a single zip tie because we're not going to loom this part up here. Just to strain relieve some of this. And I showed you this connector here, IE3, only has that one black with yellow. That's going back to the power antenna, and then the ABS connector wires. Here we are. That's all that's left of the stuff that's going to the kick panel. That part's done. Drink break. Okay. Ooh. Hot in here. Okay. Bring this back to the middle of the harness. Ground. Defog. Now, before we cut any of this to length, let's go ahead and take this yellow wire, or red wire with yellow stripe. I like these strippers. I got these from Ballinger with the Rheinsteig 707 020. These things are really great, especially for the Tefsel. It does a really great job cleaning the wire off. So I like to use a naked butt connector. Crimp tool I've had forever. I said Ballinger will sell these kind of crimps too. Just a, you see that type? It's my preferred style of butt connector crimper. Put this here. Now back here at the taillight section, you remember this black connector, the resistor I mentioned earlier, the noise suppressor. You'll find the red wire with the black stripe. You want to strip that. Put this wire on. Go ahead and heat shrink it so we don't forget about it. There we go. Okay. Now, what I want to do is cut a whole bunch of short strips of electrical tape. This part's probably off camera a little bit. Just kind of, whoop, run over my tape. Taillight section. See, that's my reverse wire I added in there. We're just gonna. Oh shit! Might need to edit my video. Then pull my connector apart. Be fixing that. There. Okay. Now we got our cut pieces of tape. Just gonna go here and just start looming, you know, just bundling the wires together. Just working our way forward. Taillight section. I always like to keep the taillight section off to this side of me. To my right is the kick panel section. To my left, taillights. Now, keep this all in the middle. This was the BM1 mentioned earlier. Usually like to pull it up to this point. I don't know, keep about 14 inches of length. Actually, before we go and tie that down, we find we have a white wire with a black stripe that's unused out of this connector now that we've cleaned up all the stuff in the rear. Undo the lock. Depin this. Pull this wire out. Gone. Set your lock back. You don't set the lock back, somebody will call you and say, my connector doesn't go together. You tell them, push the lock down. Okay, so I like to leave about, I don't know, call that a foot, 14 inches of that harness section hanging out. Lay this reverse wire up in here like that. Then bundle this together. So you're what, 6-7 inches from the rest of these wires here. That's the connector to your fuel pump. We'll run this fuel pump wire forward with the reverse light wires, and that's going to end up being a part of this bundle here. Now you might find you have some odd links here because you pull the excess both ways, and in the middle I find that just do it just like the factory does and take the excess length and just twist it around itself, and all of a sudden all that length is accounted for. Take a piece of tape, wrap it up like that. There we are. Okay. Now, I think this part in the picture tutorial on K-Swap MR2 is getting some people confused. This is the ground wire. This ground lead is for the water temp sensor. This is the main ground lead in the harness. Now, if the engine is properly grounded, we don't need to run this ground all the way to the engine. What I like to do is find this white wire, black stripe, probably like a, I don't know, 12 gauge, and this other white wire, black stripe. You're going to want to cut these. Take this lead, you're still going to use this piece of wire. We're going to connect it all like this. So watch. Strip that wire. Now all the butt connectors and the crimps and the heat shrink necessary to copy this will be part of a DIY wiring kit that we will be selling. So actually, I don't like you can set the length of the splice that you're stripping here. That's a little shorter than I would like. So going back and making this longer. Much better. Okay. So we start by all 3 of these wires. The crimp is buried. So that there. Pull this back. There we go. All crimped. Heat shrink over. Get some more pieces of tape ready to loom this. Got our fuel pump, our extension to our reverse lights, our ground lead, so now that is every wire. Let me cut some of this crap off. Black wire, white stripe, AC command. So as you can see, that is all the wires we want to use to break out to communicate with this chassis harness. So take a piece of tape, loom that. That's again the 2 wires coming from the back, reverse, fuel pump. Cut some more tape strips. There. It's not so bad when you process of elimination, just start to pull out all the stuff you're not going to use. Now at this point, I like to cut the alternator lead and the 40 amp feed to 24 inches. If you're building a custom harness for your car and you know an exact length, you can terminate it at that length. But I find for the universal stuff that I do, I don't want to knock the camera loose, but trust me that I'm sticking the tape out here 24 inches, and I'm going to be cutting all three of these, the 2 alternator and the 140 amp feed, to the 24 inch length. I think I got these from Ballinger also. It doesn't have a brand or a name, but they are some damn awesome cable cutters. So that's how much of that I cut off of there. Toss that to the side. Unnecessary weight. And this bundle here that we break off, I like to cut this to 18 inches. Then we're going to terminate that with a molex connector. So just trust that I'm setting that at 18. And I'm going to terminate every one of these wires. Just like that. So that's much shit not to be used. Okay. We'll start with the alternator wire. We will see what I got here. Ring terminal, mark that it's an alternator, and a black piece of heat shrink. Like I said, all of this stuff that you see here, I will be supplying in a DIY kit, so you can duplicate exactly what I'm doing here. You might not have the large crimpers that I'm about to show, but instead of spending the money on those, you could just stick it in a vise and then put, say, a bolt. Oh, I have a bolt right here. Let me show you guys an easy way to... Okay, here we go. So you could take a butt connector like this, stick it in a vise, and just put, say, a bolt like this, and just tighten that whole assembly down in a vise and put a nice crimp on it. So strip those back. I typically like to put the start of the word towards the connector. Sometimes I screw up and put the sleeve on backwards, and it is what it is. But if I'm planning it out, I try to put the start of the word towards the connector. Or you can get fancy and solder it, but I find a good mechanical crimp, just like factory does. Works awesome. So here's my big fancy crimp. Try not to shake the table too much. Just like that. And I probably got these from Ballinger also. Simple as that. So this will be our alternator lead that will tie to a junction block, and then just run a simple 6-gauge wire with 2 ring terminals on it out to the alternator. Like I said, I'll be supplying these labels with the writing on them in a kit. That's the alternator. Now this is a 40 amp feed to the fuse panel. This one's actually going to a busman box, so it's going to have a ring terminal on it. But the hybrid racing version that I'm going to sell with the bank of relays will have 2 matching connectors. Actually, it's a non-sex connector, so it's the exact same connector that can be flipped and connected to itself, and that's what I'll be supplying with the hybrid racing. But this one will be getting a ring terminal. Let's see what I got here. Ring terminal. There's the heat shrink. Before I forget. Crimped. I apologize. I missed one damn wire. You say, I'm sorry. And heat shrink over that. Alright, now I go to the fuse panel and the alternator. Now, how many wires do we have here on this one? So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, which is pretty normal for a car that doesn't have a speed sensor, is to have 11 wires. I want to shorten this back up again. I want my crimp to be so long. On the home stretch here, folks. If any of this wiring seems familiar to you, I can assure you that I devised this method of standalone SW20 harness prep. A lot of people have copied my work over the years, and I'm taking credit for everything, but this process with a K is certainly came from me. Okay. Now, we have molex connectors. Oh, I always get confused with what is male. You have a male and a female body, and then you have male and female pins. The male pin goes in the female body, and the female pin goes in the male body connector. It gets confusing. I always keep them separated by bags and by little pockets here, so I know which is which. But this is the 12-pin molex connector. This is the connector mating faces. I've got pin 1 marked. There's actually a little rib on the outside of it. I'm not sure you can make it out, but there's a little rise there. That's pin 1. Same thing on this other side. That little rise, that will be pin 1. And the way molex numbers these is it doesn't go down like Toyota does the long way. It's, if you had a magnifying glass, you can make it out. There's actually numbers on the face, but they number this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And then obviously opposite on the other connector. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you'll never be able to make it out here, but that says 1 and that says 3. And the writing is so small on the body of these things. But so I don't mix this up, I left the double one right here. Okay, so that style. So this style connector gets this style pin. And which side of the on the chassis that you put those on, it doesn't really matter. And this style connector will get this style pin. You can see this one's all loose, or all the pins are all separated, the housing. So that style female pin and this style female, or this style male housing. Now I'm going to use this connector on the chassis harness side. And get all my pins out here on the table. Set that off to the side. Real time, no stops. Okay. Crimp these on. You'll see that the crimp part is not very long. You're going to want to have, these connectors have 2 crimp sections. You're going to want to crimp one section on the bare wire and the other section on the insulation. That's the strain relief, and the other one's the crimp for the connection to the wire. So I always like to, I hate to keep flipping these damn things, but gotta do the middle one. So on these ones, it's the middle first, and then I'll pinch it together, and then the strain relief. And there's one. Now you just watch along as this is the fuel pump wire. It's larger, so I'm just using both on the large crimp die. And there's another. You could certainly fast forward through this piece. I'm just going to show all this shit in real time. This is how long it takes to build just the chassis harness section. You'll see me flipping them over and then going back with the smaller die and crimping it again. Just on the smaller wires, just to make sure I got an adequate crimp. Don't want any of these pulling out in the future. See how it feels kind of loose already. So go back and grab the small die, tighten now. How many wires we got left? Four wires left. Right, one pin left over. So okay, now got all those pins crimped on there. Let me go find my pin list. There we go. Like I said, I have the same list up on kswapmr2.com with the pin numbers, and that's the pin orientation. I like to always put these things back together in. Makes having all the harnesses similar really helps other guys able to, you know, troubleshoot with each other. One guy can help another guy out and essentially copy harnesses. So I'm just trying to pull the number 1 tack wire, solid black. Tack wire number 1. Make sure I don't put this in backward. Okay, goes in from this side. Number 1, tack wire. Number 2, fuel pump. fuel pump. Number 3, ignition on. That will be the black wire with the orange stripe. Fuel pump was blue wire with a black stripe. So number 3, ignition on. Number 4 is the reverse lights. Remember, that's the red wire with the yellow stripe that we extended onto the back. Don't get that mixed up with your starter wire. So number 4, reverse lights. Number 5, check engine light. That's a green wire with a white stripe. 5. Number 6 is going to be starter relay to start signal. That's the solid red wire. Push that connector too far through. There we go. Pulled it back to its seat. It ended up shoving it all the way through there. Okay. Number 7, start relay ground. That is this ground wire. Just did the same again there. Number 8, alternator light. Alternator will be solid yellow. Number 9, oil pressure. There we go. Oil pressure is yellow with a black stripe. These mixed up. Yellow with a black stripe. You hear it click in. And then down here, that was 9, 11, water. 10, 11, what was 10? 10 is speed. This is a 92 harness, so there won't be a speed signal going forward. 11 is water, 12 is AC command. Ooh, almost got that mixed up. That's the water, so that one's in 12. There we go. So that's all 11 wires and that molex connector. A little piece of electrical tape here. That's a messed up piece. Don't need that now. Now guess what? We have nothing left but to put loom on this. So keep my pairs of scissors, lay all this other stuff off to the side. All right. Let me cut more tape. Got the scissors. Okay, now. This is just 3/4 split loom. I'll be supplying adequate length, in the DIY kit for you guys to do this yourselves. I find it's the easiest way to do this is to get it started, and because we know we're stopping at that connector in the back, go ahead and put some tape around this piece right here, and then we can just start feeding this down. And the wires that poke out, we can just go back through and feed them back on. Ooh, might have forgot. This harness actually had the ABS connector on it, so we are going to have to dance around one of the pins, or dance around a connector. So take my tape off. But that did help me loom it that far along. Trying to get all this in one shot here on the camera. You can see me feeding it. It'll bunch up, and then I just kind of push it on down the harness. Maybe a little more. There we go. Like I said, trying to keep all this in the shot. You can see that this loom would happily run all the way to there. So, bring that guy out the bottom. zip tie on this just to add some strain relief to it. Okay. Obviously, I buy those by the 100-foot roll, so there's a pile of it down there. Now I just cut a whole bunch of, once again, strips of electrical tape. Try not to get my shit all knotted up. Sorry, that was my stomach. I usually try to put tape on each end towards the ends to lock the loom in position so it can't slide either way. Oopsie. Okay. A couple more on this end, and then we'll get to the bigger loom on the other side. Seems like I'm going to end this right in time to need to get something to eat. Hopefully you can see me all the way down here putting this tape on this harness. So that is the section. So all the way from the middle where the alternator and the 40 amp feed is, all the way to the that resistor, the black connector. So that section is all loomed. And I think I said that was 3/4. I actually think that's half. That's half because this is 3/4, and then the engine harness we use 1 inch. So half, 3/4. Now I pull out the 3/4 inch loom. Just feed that from this side. And I'll show you why. Because where this ends, there's no other wires breaking out. So I can already put tape around this. And start feeding this down to the other end. Any wires that pop out, we'll go back and we'll tuck them in and put some electrical tape around it. Over here off camera, tucking loom. Yeah, so with the ABS wire in there, 3/4 is as small as you're ever going to be able to go. So with the ABS wire in there, this is actually kind of snug. So I will just wrap these this way. And then, like I said, work my way down. Add some every foot, 16 inches. Ooh, I can hear my tummy rumbling. Sorry if you can hear that. All right. That, my friends, was a real-time video of what it takes to cleanly prepare an MR2 chassis harness for standalone use and removal of all the unnecessary shit. So you can see this here. This here's the tail light run. Here's the tail light run. There's that resistor. Everything loomed forward. There's our ABS connector that we saved. You can run this through the inner sheet metal, poke a hole through the inner fender, and run this to the sensor and the wheel well. Our BM1, which is the connector behind the seat, to the fuel pump. There's everything behind the kick panel. Actually, that's a piece on the factory part that's taped up. So there's the connectors to the kick panel, all the stuff that's left. The ground that you must reattach, defog, alternator, 40 amp feed to our fuse panel, and that's our 11-pin molex connector. In another video, we'll show you how to how to build the other relay end, and then we'll obviously pin the other connector the same, so we can tie all the aftermarket relay bank into this, and you'll be tying your ECU to command that relay bank. But it's like I say, it's as simple as that, but it's as simple as that to get rid of all that factory fuse block and all that unnecessary shit off of the factory harness. And I mean, this thing is considerably lighter and simpler once you delete all that junk off of there. And you saw all the stuff I removed. So hopefully that's helpful. Like I said, there's a picture tutorial at kswapmr2.com. Some of the stuff doesn't make sense unless you follow the whole thing to the end, because I remove a lot of wires that we don't care what they go to. We just know we don't use those anymore. And this is essentially what you're left with. I still gave you all the connections to the dash: oil pressure, check engine light, water temp, tach. So all that stuff still runs to the dash to talk to the dash. The whole front half of the car is on a separate system. This didn't alter anything else going on in the dash or the heater controls or the turn signals, headlights, any of that stuff. That was all left alone. Same as all the tail lights, turn signals, hazard stuff, anything that ran to the back half of the car, power antenna, all that was left untouched. Really, the only thing we did was clean up anything engine side related. So I hope this helps you, and more videos to come. Thank you.